Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Con la ayuda financiera de la Unión Europea.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling it, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you made it happen, is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
¿Por qué es importante que estemos juntos en esto? Porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocio, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OAS, y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno, y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra, y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children, and they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you made it happen is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
¿Por qué es importante que estemos juntos en esto? Porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocio, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we're expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para.
We have the following delegations connected: Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas, Belize, connected without further testing, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Grenada, Guyana, Honduras, Mexico, Paraguay, Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, Uruguay, and Venezuela. So, Chair, I confirm that there is a quorum. Very well. Good afternoon, Her Excellency, Vice President Marta Lucia Ramirez, also Foreign Minister, Mr. Paul Green, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade and Integration of Antigua and Barbuda, Dr. Carissa Tien, once again, Pan American Health Organization, and Ella Ospina de Nichols, Director of the Presidential Agency for International Relations of Colombia, distinguished ambassadors, permanent representatives of the member states, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, I hereby call to order this special session of the Permanent Council, which has been convened at the request of the Permanent Mission of Colombia, keeping with document CP/INF 027/21, for the purpose of following up on Resolution 1165, entitled The Equitable Distribution of Vaccines for COVID-19, approved by this Council on 17th February of 2021. In this regard, and if there are no observations, we hereby approve the order of business CP/O0D 3221/21. If there are no observations, it is approved. Before proceeding, I would like to note that His Excellency Alfredo Borrero Vega, Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador, is with us. Likewise, Mr. Cristian Giamet Fernandez, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Strategic Matters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Costa Rica, as well as Carlos Saenz, Secretary General of the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Nicaragua, accompanied by Cristian Toledo, Director General of Health Surveillance of the same ministry. And they will be given the floor. I'll be offering them the floor first during the various statements by the delegations of the member states. So with that, let us begin this session. Now, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong. I am beginning with Carissa Tien. No, Mr. Chairman. No, with the order of business to which I made reference. So before we go to the statements, we have a protocol order which has been surgically put together very respectfully. So we are now awaiting the respective participation. Colombia. Mr. Chairman, yes, I am turning to Marta Lucia Ramirez, Vice President and Foreign Minister of the Republic of Colombia. You have the floor. Is our friend Marta Lucia Ramirez connected? Here she is, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, I give you the floor, ma'am. Please go ahead. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. We can't hear her, Chair. We still cannot hear you, Madam Vice President. But no problem, this is quite common. So certainly we can resolve this quickly. We have... Good afternoon. Can you hear me from Colombia? Yes, we could hear you. Go ahead, Madam Vice President. Very well. Good day. I would like to affectionately or warmly greet all of those who are with us, all of those who I see on this screen. I always recognize our great friend, Ambassador of the Republic of Uruguay, Permanent Representative of Uruguay to the Organization of American States, Ambassador Washington Abdallah, Chairman of this Permanent Council. I also warmly greet His Excellency, the Honorable Paul Tetgreen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Antigua and Barbuda, and also Chair or President of CARICOM, also Luis Almagro, Dr. Almagro, a great jurist and a friend of all of us, the Secretary General, who has really given great impetus to the OAS. I warmly greet Secretary Almagro, Dr. Carissa Etienne, Director of the Pan American Health Organization, all of the ambassadors. I think we had some difficulty with the agenda because I was talking with Angela Ospina, who is the director of the Colombian Agency for International Cooperation. So I'm not sure at which point we switch over. I think the idea was perhaps that she should speak first and that I would speak after her. So I would like to give her the floor. She will speak very briefly, and the idea was that she would kick it off. So I now would turn it over to Dr. Angela Ospina. Good morning, Washington Abdallah, or good day. Washington Abdallah, Permanent Representative of Uruguay to the Organization of American States and Chairman of the Permanent Council. Distinguished Foreign Minister and Vice President Marta Lucia Ramirez, I greet you. Your Excellency, Honorable Everly Paul Shedgreen, Minister of Foreign Relations, International Trade and Migration of Antigua and Barbuda, and also Chair of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. Also, Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Dr. Carissa Etienne, Director of the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, ambassadors. We find ourselves in this current special virtual session of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, OAS, at the request of the Government of Colombia, the purpose being to follow up on the resolution on equitable distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. As the Presidential Agency for International Cooperation of Colombia, APC, Colombia, we are joining this meeting of the Council, bearing in mind that we are the ones responsible for the cooperation mechanism to which our Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs will make reference. The pandemic has presented different challenges, posed different challenges, including continuing with South-South cooperation actions and projects in a context of economic and social difficulties for all of the countries, and particularly for the countries of the Global South. Always keeping in mind the concept of solidarity, which characterizes us in the Inter-American system. From Colombia, we wish to strengthen all cooperation mechanisms with which we work with the countries of the Inter-American system. And of these, I wish to make special mention of the mixed commissions by which we define cooperation programs for 2-year periods. Those committees are generally bilateral. Nonetheless, in 2020, we signed a regional agreement with some member countries of CARICOM in which we will continue, in the context of which we'll continue working in order to strengthen the principle of mutual benefit, which is characteristic of South-South cooperation. Colombia will continue to work to contribute to and at the same time benefit from the strengthened exchange of knowledge, good practices, technologies among the countries of the Inter-American system through the South-South and triangular cooperation programs. With that, I conclude these introductory remarks, and I give the floor to the Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, Marta Lucia Ramirez. Thank you very much. Well, I think I already extended the protocol greetings. I would simply like to reiterate something we've discussed on a prior occasion before this same council on this moment, which is fraught with complexity, uncertainty, and fears for citizens on the part of citizens of our hemisphere and the whole world in the face of this very complex health and economic crisis that humankind is facing at a time when we know that the new strains are getting ever more difficult to control, and it is becoming difficult to know just what the effectiveness of the vaccines will be. This is affecting the whole health system, so we need to continue going forward in the face of uncertainty. We are determined to move forward with our Ibero-American people, our Latin American people, our hemispheric people, in amidst the conditions of uncertainty in the face of this COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a negative impact on so many millions of families worldwide. More than 4.5 million persons have left a home empty forever, left behind their families and their societies. And we have seen how poverty and inequality have worsened in all states, and we have seen in the case of our hemisphere serious social malaise. What is happening as people feel, as all sections of the population increasingly feel that they're vulnerable, but particularly the poorest of the poor. For this reason, together with President Ivan Duque, we have continued to work with great impetus to assigning priorities to two objectives which are simultaneous and both of which are essential. And they're really two different sides of the same coin. On the one hand, the objective is to strengthen the efficiency of our health system, trying to make sure that the largest possible number of citizens get their full vaccination, the full dose, in the shortest time possible, and at the same time, spur on the economy, recover jobs, do all possible to make sure that social assistance programs continue reaching the poorest, but in particular make sure that the poorest can actually have a greater capacity to get employment once again, because we know that the only certain vaccine against poverty is to have jobs, is to have the possibility of enterprises that are sustainable, scalable, and profitable for our citizens. For this reason, insofar as Colombia is simultaneously moving forward to attain these two objectives, and I say they are two sides of the same coin, Colombia also wishes to raise the need to continue insisting on a multilateral level on the efforts that we all need to make to overcome the pandemic, secure greater access to lines of financing that all countries need, attain greater multilateral cooperation. This is to make sure that international cooperation is much more effective to reduce these gaps of inequality among nations and also among the different regions of the world. Now, furthermore, we understand that here the first obligation is that is one to the inhabitants of our region. It's an obligation of solidarity. This really has to be one of the principles which, together with the principle of democracy and freedoms, is what really keeps our nations who are part of the Organization of American States United. This pandemic has cost the lives of practically 4,700,000 of so many persons in CARICOM and in worldwide. I said more than 4.5 million. In Colombia, it's well over 100,000 persons who have died, and that's why I am convinced that we need to be very clear on the objective. We must not let ourselves slow down because of the pain of the circumstances that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, with new lives lost every day. And so the objective is to attain the greatest possible levels of vaccination in the shortest possible time, so as to be able to continue going forward with economic recovery with the greatest possible speed and depth, so as to generate jobs. We need to look around and look at those who are undergoing such severe difficulties, oftentimes with now having the economic strength. Well, none of us has it in great abundance, but the truth is that in Colombia, with the leadership of the president, Ivan Duque, we have committed to always looking around us and to make sure that this principle of solidarity is one of the main pillars of Colombia's foreign policy. And therefore, with this principle, so we've developed our statute for temporary protected status for Venezuelan migrants around this principle, and also on the basis of solidarity, we're developing this program today that we wish to share with you. And this is to see how we can help make sure that there is more effective vaccination that happens more speedily in our region, especially in the CARICOM countries. This solidarity on the part of Colombia, well, some might say, well, how is that possible if Colombia itself is facing so many challenges? We face so many challenges, but at the same time, we've also often received the solidarity of others. For us, this mechanism, the COVAX mechanism, has been fundamental, the work that has been done by the World Health Organization. We have always had the World Health Organization, the directors in constant contact with President Ivan Duque. We have also had solidarity from other nations, the solidarity of the United States with Colombia, which we acknowledge and for which we're thankful. So that's what this moment of humankind is about giving and receiving. We have not yet vaccinated our entire people. We have a vaccination program which in principle was designed to culminate in December, by which time we would have 37 million, 70% of our population vaccinated, and that would guarantee us herd immunity. We've been able to speed up our vaccination process to some extent, thanks in particular to those almost 5 million vaccines that we've also received due to the collaboration of the government of the United States, cooperation of the government of the United States. And so we have assigned some resources to have more vaccines for the CARICOM and at the same time facilitate CARICOM overcoming this pandemic, a pandemic which has hit the region so hard. And we know that we need to recover tourism quickly in order to be able to have the capacity to generate more income, to understand, we all need to understand that the countries of the CARICOM don't have a protective infrastructure that is so diverse, an entrepreneurial fabric, a web that is so diverse as we do in Colombia. We're very blessed because despite the many difficulties of Colombia, we have a truly diverse and competitive business sector, but particularly very committed to our country. And that is also part of what we all need to reformulate. How can we become more effectively integrated? How can we, overcoming this crisis of vaccination, how can we strengthen our ties of integration? How can we develop productive chains in the region? Today, we've spoken with Secretary Almagro, and I know he's always extremely concerned about the issues of economic development, generating quality jobs in the region. Here, we think we need to take major strides forward in order to strengthen this regional integration. And with integrated value chains, we really need to look at the domestic market or the market that this hemisphere has. How should we should be taking much greater advantage of the breakdown in global value chains and see how a good part of Chinese production that is in demand in the United States is not being bought by the United States from China. So how can we fill that gap? Because demand in the US market is right there. And we need to be able to generate a greater supply, a greater offer that would make it possible to have the possibility to create more jobs in our region. That's why I think that this moment when vaccination has to be the priority for us all, we must also take advantage of it to look beyond. For us, the commitment that we felt from the United States and from Canada as well has been so important. It's so committed to us, both through the COVAX mechanism as well as commitment with our whole region, the whole hemisphere. The effort that Canada has also made with the Donors Roundtable, which puts our minds at ease, knowing that we are going to be able to vaccinate all of the 2 million Venezuelans who are in Colombia. Colombia cannot even doubt when it comes to the dilemma of first, the false dilemma of first Colombians or first Venezuelans. Well, both at the same time, based on the basic criteria defining age brackets for vaccination, for the vaccination sequence, but Colombians and Venezuelans equally, so that we can fully overcome all of the challenges that we are facing today due to this pandemic. So for us, it's also very important to place a lot of emphasis on the indigenous populations Here, there's a $500,000 donation to the Pan American Health Organization in December of last year, also to support the Andean community of nations to go forward with planning and promotion to ensure access to the vaccines for the indigenous peoples of Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia. This was also very useful. President Duque designed a whole logistical scheme to be able to reach those remote areas where our indigenous populations live. And here, among us all, we have been learning on how to get by during this period, such that CARICOM, we know, will figure out the best way to distribute these resources to make sure that the vaccines that can be bought actually end up immunizing those populations that are the priority. We are proud of what has been achieved on prioritizing the most vulnerable population. This shows us that that is what the commitment to inclusion is all about. That is real equity, and equity goes hand in hand with solidarity. So for this reason, I am very pleased on behalf of President Ivan Duque and on behalf of the government of Colombia to reiterate Colombia's support so that through the COVAX mechanism, these resources of the Colombian nation state can be used for the prompt, safe vaccination of the population of the CARICOM as you may define it.
Council, this milestone in the list of actions that Colombia has undertaken to combat the coronavirus in our hemisphere, the voluntary contribution of $1 million to the Pan American Health Organization destined for the purchase of these COVID-19 vaccines for the member states of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. This contribution was made to fulfill Colombia's commitment with the Permanent Council Resolution 1165 on the equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, which recognizes that only through the vaccination of the citizens of our region, we will have the possibility to save lives, which is the main priority, but also to achieve this economic reactivation needed to guarantee people's livelihoods, increase food security, reduce unemployment and poverty, and reverse social and economic setbacks. In this regard, Your Excellency, Honorable Minister Green, I wish to recognize your leadership, the leadership of Antigua, Barbuda, and other Caribbean states in the drafting and approval by consensus of this resolution, which was so necessary for our hemisphere. For this, you have our heartfelt gratitude and appreciation. And I would like to thank all the member states, and of course, once again, to congratulate Secretary Luis Almagro for all his contributions for the strength of the American States Organization. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, estimada.
I thank you very much indeed, esteemed President. And I am pleased to give the floor now to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Immigration. And I'm sorry for the slight shifting in the presentation. Please go ahead, sir.
Minister, could you please request the floor?
Thank you, Chair, ministers and other delegates from the government of Colombia, delegations representing the nations in membership of the OAS. Today's exercise gives life and meaning to Resolution 1165, which was adopted by the Permanent Council and initiated by the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda, entitled The Equitable Distribution of COVID-19 Vaccines. This resolution was not only posited by Antigua and Barbuda, but also bore the imprimatur of the CARICOM group. We were in the forefront of the resolution because we recognized that access to vaccines and the distribution were inequitable and discriminatory. And in that connection, it was almost guaranteed that the COVID-19 pandemic would be prolonged, decimating livelihoods and killing people in the poor countries of the world. We also knew that unless the major vaccine makers scale up production and collaborated with developing countries to license patents to regional pharmaceutical companies, much of the world would be struggling to survive. We were also very conscious that the sale price of the vaccines was extremely high, and that developing countries whose economies were already grievously impacted would find it impossible to find the money to pay for them. That is why we urge international financial institutions to provide low-cost financing to all developing countries, particularly small, vulnerable states, to help contain and suppress the COVID-19 pandemic. Very little of this has happened. Instead, the pandemic has raged on, spawning variants that pose even greater threats, while most of the world's people in poor countries remain unvaccinated. This is not a proud moment in human history. Mr. Chairman, it is against this backdrop and background of insufficient effort to allow access to vaccines that on behalf of the CARICOM group of countries, I thank the government and people of Colombia for their generous gift of US $1 million to purchase vaccines for the sub-region. Colombia has put its money where its mouth is, demonstrating recognition that the world is a community of nations, each inescapably interlocked and interconnected. The money is being made available to Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, which is doing a marvelous job in helping the countries of our hemisphere to manage this COVID-19 pandemic. PAHO has also performed well in coordinating the distribution of vaccines from the COVAX facility to states in Latin America and the Caribbean, despite the shortcomings of the COVAX system itself. We therefore take this opportunity to thank PAHO for the hugely beneficial service that it has given to our hemisphere, and especially to those countries that have had to rely on the COVAX facility to secure vaccines. Mr. Chairman, I note that even though my small country shares all the vulnerabilities and underdevelopment of other small island developing states, we had to purchase our supply of vaccines on the COVAX because of a single criterion of high per capita income that has been applied to Antigua and Barbuda. We did not get the vaccines for free. Mr. Chair, while we in CARICOM are deeply grateful for the assistance we're receiving from friendly countries to procure vaccines, it is a matter of deep regret for us and to us that we are in this untenable position in the first place. If this pandemic has taught the world a single solitary lesson, it is that humanity should never again experience conditions in which a few countries use their wealth to purchase almost all the vaccines produced, leaving the majority of nations in dire straits. It is shocking that only 1 in every 10 persons in Latin America and the Caribbean has been fully vaccinated. We all know that this sad situation exists because a few countries have purchased more than 70% of the total vaccines produced by the major pharmaceutical companies. In some cases, these countries have bought as much as 3 times the quantity of vaccines needed to vaccinate the total populations. The pharmaceutical companies must also share in the blame for this situation, in which people are quite literally dying for vaccines. While vaccines against this lethal virus and its variants should have been a global good, available to all mankind, it became a commodity to be sold on commercial terms to the largest and richest purchasers, ignoring the needs of many citizens of our one planet. It is telling, Mr. Chair, that my government has tried negotiating for months with 4 major pharmaceutical companies in the US to purchase vaccines, only to be told that not one vaccine will be available until January 2022 at earliest. And even then, there is no guarantee of supply since the list of waiting countries is long. The majority of nations of the world are reduced to begging the rich to spare us the vaccine supplies that they have overstocked. While we are grateful that countries such as the United States are making quantities of their oversupply available to nations in need, the point is that this situation should not have occurred. Nations ought not to plead for vaccines to save the lives of their population or to spare their economies of the harmful impact of the pandemic. Consequently, some of our countries in CARICOM have turned to non-traditional suppliers, like China and Russia, to procure vaccines. We must stop the pandemic from killing our people and from destroying our economies. Therefore, we will acquire vaccines from wherever and from whoever we can. In this regard, we are more than thankful that there are suppliers in other parts of the world to whom we can turn and who are ready to supply. Mr. Chairman, in our very OAS, in the Pan American Health Organization, and more globally at the UN and the WHO, governments must address this unjust and inequitable system to ensure that it never, ever happens again. And I say this because it seems almost certain that pandemics will recur and that COVID is not the end of it. The global system must be such that vaccine production can be decentralized to regions so as to produce vaccines in sufficient quantities and at reasonable enough prices that all countries can inoculate their people. At the end of this pandemic, which will be more than protracted and more lethal in many regions of the world than in the Western developed nations, many more millions will have died than the current 4.1 million whose lives have been taken since December 2019. We should recall that today, there are over 190 million COVID-19 cases worldwide, and the numbers are every day increasing. At the moment, the world is living on the cusp of a hope that all these nations will vaccinate at least 70% of their people, make it all nations safer than we are now. But that is only a hope. There's no certainty about it. So our global hope is dimmed by a global fear. And that fear is about when will we reach the goal of inoculating 70% of our people across the world? And what is the state of safety while we live in this hope? Only one country to date, Iceland, has reached the 70% mark so far. COVID, therefore, is still very much with us. And realistically, Mr. Chairman, it will be years before our planet is truly safe again. Therefore, none of our countries is really safe today, however fully vaccinated individual populations might be. Chairman, delegates, representatives of the Colombian government, even with this act of generosity from Colombia, we in the CARICOM region remain uncertain of when vaccines can be purchased and delivered through PAHO, given the fact that the pharmaceutical companies are saying quite clearly that no vaccines will be available before January 2022. Nonetheless, CARICOM countries, the CARICOM region, we are grateful to the government and people of Colombia for this very kind and timely donation, which we deeply appreciate and for which we thank them most profusely and most sincerely. Colombia, you have shown the way with action. That is what the world needs now. Less talk, less promises, less obfuscation, and more concrete and beneficial action. On behalf of Prime Minister Gaston Brown, Chairman of the CARICOM Community of Nations, I once again extend profuse and profound appreciation to the government and people of Colombia for this timely and most useful, needed donation to save Caribbean lives and livelihoods. Muchas gracias, Colombia. Dios le bendiga. Mr. Chair, if it pleases you, I thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, estimado Paul Chitgren. Doctora Carissa Etienne, directora de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, nuevamente al piso. Adelante. Con placer la estamos oyendo.
You have the floor, Dr. Etienne.
Permanent Council, Ambassador Washington Abdallah, and Permanent Representative of Uruguay, Honorable Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, Mrs. Martha Lucia Ramirez, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Commerce and Immigration of Antigua and Barbuda, Mr. Paul Chet Green, distinguished ambassadors and permanent representatives to the OAS, Honorable Secretary General of the Organization of the American States, Mr. Luis Almagro, Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, Mr. Ambassador Nestor Mendez, and Director of the Presidential Agency for International Cooperation of Colombia, EPC Colombia, Ms. Angela Ospina de Nicols, distinguished delegates of member states. Mr. President and Your Excellencies, the convening of this special session of the OAS Permanent Council to address the Council's resolution on the equitable distribution of vaccines for COVID-19 is not only a testament to the magnitude of this issue of vaccine inequity in the context of this COVID-19 pandemic, but also the OAS member states' commitment to solidarity in tackling this problem. As of this week, the region of the Americas, as we've said before, has reported close to 75 million COVID-19 cases and nearly 2 million COVID-19 deaths, representing almost 40% and 50% of the global COVID-19 cases and deaths respectively. Even though that there is a general downward trend in new cases, many countries in our region are experiencing a resurgence in the cases, with some being attributed to increase in the SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant in largely unvaccinated populations. The SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant of concern has been reported in 17 countries in our region, with 11 countries reporting all 4 SARS-CoV-2 variants of concern. Mr. President, Excellencies, COVID-19 pandemic has not only caused loss of lives, but as you well know, it has caused tremendous healthcare burdens, and it is having an unprecedented disruptive impact on the socioeconomic fabric of countries within our region, but particularly in the heavily tourism-dependent small island development states. A recent report by the Economic Commission on Latin America and the Caribbean paints a rather grim outlook for our region. More than 7 million companies have closed in Latin America and the Caribbean in the wake of the pandemic. More than a third of people in our region are living in poverty, and 1 in 4 worry about where they will get their next meal. Unemployment rates are higher here than any other developing region. The report shows how the pandemic continues to be fueled by inequality. And unfortunately, Our region has the highest ratios of inequity in the world. We urge countries to continue prioritizing health and social safety nets as part of their COVID-19 response as they turn their sights to COVID recovery. However, we must be mindful that the full economic and social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is yet to be felt and will continue beyond the pandemic, with widening of social inequalities and the poverty gap as well. And that is so if we do not begin now to change the developmental paradigm. It is therefore urgent that we implement all measures necessary to bring this pandemic to a halt, to save lives and preserve livelihood, and ensure a holistic and inclusive approach to building back better and leaving no one behind. The vaccination of our populations, combined with other effective public health measures, is key to controlling COVID-19 and halting this pandemic. However, having the financial resources more than the public health imperative has thus far determined how quickly countries can secure the tools that they need to combat this virus. You know, vaccination against COVID-19 should not be a privilege of the rich. It is a human right, and we need to ensure this equity of access for all. As countries struck deals with vaccine manufacturers who struck deals with vaccine manufacturers are pulling further ahead in their vaccination coverage. And we see that coverage in the middle income and low income countries continues to linger in the single digits for much of our region. Despite the launch of the COVAX facility with the intent of making vaccines affordable and equitable, just 1 in 10 of the vaccines administered worldwide have been here in the Americas. And even with limited bilateral deals, months of COVAX deliveries and the recent donations from countries like the United States, only 1 in 7 people in Latin America and the Caribbean have been fully protected against COVID. Mr. President and Excellencies, what we need now more than ever is a show of solidarity, regionally and globally, to ensure vaccine equity. And so in this regard, I highly commend the OAS on its show of commitment to the equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines through its adoption of the resolution on February 17th this year. I am even more delighted and encouraged that your resolution recalls the PIHO Directing Council's resolution CDSS 1.R1 on the equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, as this indicates a coherent and consistent policy direction. Furthermore, the reality that we are here today in this special session is in itself a demonstration of solidarity by the government of Colombia with its generous donation of $1 million to CARICOM countries to support their vaccination programs, and this is exemplary. I also wish to applaud the government and the people of the Republic of Colombia for their generosity and expression of solidarity. And I request of Her Excellency Marta Lucia Ramirez, the Vice President and Minister for Foreign Affairs, to please extend our gratitude to your President. This is the type of solidarity that we should continue to highlight and encourage for others to follow within the context of where we find ourselves with vaccine inequity. PAHO is committed to ensuring that all countries in our region continue to scale up vaccination with not only the procurement of vaccines, but also making available other resources such as syringes, cold chain storage facilities, transport logistics, risk communication, and human resources to enable an effective vaccination program. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Antigua and Barbuda, I want to announce that
the PAHO revolving fund is already making arrangements with vaccine producers, and we have some serious firm commitments that we will be able to access and purchase vaccines through the revolving fund this year, the first quarter of this year, for our member states. And this is excellent news for us, and we are being supported by the OAS and the IDB. Vaccine equity does not only relate to the vaccine itself, but also to the other enabling resources and processes that are vulnerable to demand and supply economics. And this can negatively impact a country's vaccination program. Hence, there are ample opportunities for countries and entities to show solidarity in vaccine equity. I wish to commend and thank the United States government for its show of solidarity with the donation of 3 million doses of Pfizer vaccine to CARICOM countries and additional doses to Haiti. These donations, combined with the donation from the government of Colombia, is critical to the gradual scaling up of vaccination in the Caribbean. I am assured that the Caribbean governments and people are grateful for the generosity and this show of solidarity, both by the United States and Colombia, and the leadership that has been demonstrated by the OAS in championing vaccine equity. I wish also to place on record our own thanks to the government of Canada for their generous support to PAHO for the COVID response and for the promise of vaccine donations. One is safe until everyone is safe. It therefore behoves us to continue to work together in solidarity to halt this COVID-19 pandemic and to achieve the goal of safe region, a safe world for all of us. Thank you, and God bless all of us, and keep safe.
Well, I'm still thinking of that terrific sentence, vaccination inequity. Well put. Thank you. Vice President, would you like to add a footnote, any closing comments on the subject, or would you like us to move forward? Inequidad vaccinal. Yes. But I'd like to state certainly my deep appreciation to those who have spoken, and the concept of inequidad vaccinal, vaccine inequity, is spot on. We've had a scientific committee put together to decide domestically what the criteria for vaccination should be, but in this very inequity that we all recognize and that we wish to pull together to overcome, the countries themselves, of course, and quite frankly, the multinational companies, I think, should also come up with some ideas. If they want to come up with criteria, we'll have at it. Is it income level? Is it age groups? I mean, you name it. The name of the game is to ensure that those vaccines are sent to the countries where they are desperately missing. And to speak of inequity in this context is, quite frankly, essential, because we must call out, we must bring to the attention of the world the role that the multinationals have played. Everybody knows the big game pharmaceuticals have a seat at the table, capital T, capital T. And so even governments have indeed intervened to suggest some measures to palliate. And as our dear friend from Antigua and Barbuda, the vaccines were not given away. This wasn't charity, friends. We paid every single one of them in Colombia, save this most recent generosity of the United States. But coming back to the initial concept, when people are ready to pay and are paying, with that and without it, there have to be criteria that are transparent and that are scientific and that are clear. Thank you. Thank you so much, says the chair of the council. Let me also very much appreciate the presence here of the Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador, Mr. Alfredo Borrero Vega, as well as Mr. Christian Guillaume Fernandez, Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs and Strategic Management of Foreign Affairs and Religious Affairs in the Republic of Costa Rica, and Carlos Sáenz, Secretary General of the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Nicaragua, who is accompanied by Mr. Christian Toledo, Director General of Health. I understand that we have next, ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador, Mr. Alfredo Borrero Vega. Distinguished Ambassador, Chair of the Permanent Council of the OAS, Washington Abdallah Vega, and Permanent Representative of Uruguay. And a very good afternoon, Ms. Marta Lucia Ramirez, Vice President and Foreign Affairs Minister, Chancellor of the Republic of Colombia. And greetings also to the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Immigration, Paul Trott Green. And a very good afternoon to the Secretary General of the OAS and to the Director of the Pan American Health Organization. Good afternoon, too, to the Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, Dr. Carlos Játiva, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Ecuador to the OAS. Greetings all on behalf of the government of Guillermo Lasso Mendoza, President of my country. I am honored to address you from Quito, which UNESCO has designated a part of the World Heritage. And if you would be so kind, I would ask that the first slide of my presentation be made available to you. This is what we are living in Ecuador. Take a good look at this picture. Take a good picture of it. But this is what is changing from the moment when, back in November, in the midst of his electoral campaign, a committee of experts was appointed to develop a vaccination program wherein politics would have no place, but wherein policy would be made. Now, I am a doctor of medicine, and I became entrusted with that vaccination program. And in the period immediately thereafter, from November onwards, I had the privilege of visiting numbers of neighboring states to look at how we might proceed to vaccinate the greatest number of people who needed it in our country. That is the first slide. Here comes the second. What we did was to develop what we call a vaccinometer, And it is what you think it is. The idea is to keep track of the doses that have been administered. We've got 17,500,000 in our population. That's the population of Ecuador. And we want to vaccinate 9 million in 100 days. That's the goal. Why? Because we're looking for herd immunity. And in the previous government, throughout the whole process, 2 million doses were vaccinated. We're already, after 56 days in government, up to, as you can see, 6,807,060 for their first doses. And we have 1,934,397 people who are already in receipt of their second dose. So since we took office, here is the total, 8,741,457. Those are the number of doses that have been put in people's arms. So that's where we stand. Now, in that process of boosting the vaccination coverage, Ecuador is now first in the world in terms of numbers of doses administered per the size of the population. And naturally here we take the opportunity to express our gratitude to all who have helped us make that the case. Most especially, we turn to the Inter-American System, to the Pan American Health Organization, to the Inter-American Development Bank, both of which, by their actions, have made it possible for us to be where we are today and to have vaccinated an average of 250,000 doses daily, ladies and gentlemen. We're already up to the 500,000 migrants who are in our Ecuadorian territory, and we are already distributing the vaccine to children who are 12 years of age or more and that have catastrophic other diseases. And so we have broadened also the vaccination program for those who are 16 years and more. We start at 12 when there's serious comorbidities. So we have been using the electoral rolls to keep track of who is where and to make it easy to be vaccinated. Don't forget the last elections were the 11th of April, so people generally remember where it is they went to vote. And we decided this was a no-brainer. The voting polls were the perfect place, was it not, to bring people to be vaccinated. And we made it clear also that, guess what, this is not a government program. This is the society of Ecuador. We are joining hands, the military with the Red Cross, with the academe, all citizens. The slogan is, give us your shoulder so we can be vaccinated. And so that we can achieve general vaccination. But the donation of 2 million vaccines, of which 1 million got here last week and the other arrived yesterday from the United States, we cannot say enough. President Guillermo Lasso has launched the strong diplomatic initiative to go out and get the vaccines. He has personally been bending over backwards in every way possible to be in touch with other leaders in order to really underscore the great urgency that we consider the vaccination campaign must have. And if naturally we couldn't possibly dream of forgetting the autochthonous and the isolated peoples that live in the Ecuadorian Amazon or up in the highlands. And so we also say, can't come to be vaccinated? We'll come to you. And as I showed you in that first picture, you saw that boat with somebody in the canoe vaccinating the people that lived there in the adjacent jungle. We go where we need to be. Why? Because this is a national priority, and we understand that that is the sum and essence of what we need to do to jumpstart the economy. We, as of a week, have detected the Delta variant in our country. We have done everything we could to isolate where necessary. And I think that has served as an additional encouragement to people to get out there and get vaccinated. And so we don't have any more age groups, no age groups. We're just saying, if you are above 16 years of age, go get vaccinated. That's the marching order. And so we hope that we will, in the next few days, we will in fact comply with the president's hope to vaccinate 9 million Ecuadorians in 100 days. Now, let me say that's a historic landmark. Never in its history has Ecuador engaged full throttle in such terrific challenge. And we do it because we get that it has to be done. And for that, of course, to that end, the government alone can't do it. Everybody has to do it. And we get it, and everybody else does too. That's the good news. Now, we do have let's face it. We have our own naysayers. We have our own people who will be darned if they're going to be vaccinated. They come up with the regular, the regular explanations, the regular theories. But we have consistently said the vaccine distances you from disease, it distances you from death. But meanwhile, very much focusing on social distancing, on ongoing hand washing, basic hygiene, and last but not least, the proverbial mask wearing. We are dropping the level of people in intensive care units. We are operating in a way that people are understanding that it isn't just, it's not just, that's huge, but it isn't only, it cannot be only the additional emphasis on vaccines that has to be done. It isn't just the curative, critical as that is. We were aiming for the preventive. We want a population that is healthy and not sick. It's that simple. We already have vaccine doses that are paid, and we hope that between now and the end of the year, we'll get some 30 million doses with which we will keep at it. Now, this program has to be, of course, continued, and we recognize the excellency of Colombia's program. By the way, not just for COVID, Colombia is right up there in terms, it's a role model for vaccination of all sorts. And that, we believe, as Colombia does, has to be a state policy. You have to care for your kids, care for the elderly, care for women, care for everybody. And so, distinguished friends, Chair, distinguished Director of PAHO, and Vice President of Colombia, thank you for your deference and for all of your support and enthusiasm. It is an enormous privilege to be with you today. This is what we need for democracy to blossom, for there to be a real upwelling of what we believe is true and right. And you could only do what it is given to you to do. We believe in dialogue. Do we have differences of opinion? Well, obviously we do. But we hope that when it comes to it with something as absolutely essential as this, people will understand that there's a time for political differences and there's another time for the real deal. Thank you, and a very good afternoon to you all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Says the chair. I now give the floor to Mr. Christian Guillermet Fernandez, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Strategic Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Religion. Costa Rica, please. Vice Minister, you appear to be muted at the moment. Can you hear me now? Yep, go ahead. We hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. A warm welcome to you, and certainly a warm welcome and greetings to Her Excellency Marta Lucia Ramirez, Vice President of Foreign Affairs, Minister of the Republic of Colombia, His Excellency Mr. Alfredo Borrero Vega, Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador, Mr. Carlos Sáenz, Secretary General of Nicaragua. Again, my dear friend Carissa Etienne, Director General of PAHO, we cannot thank you enough and applaud enough the excellent way that you have supported us and led us through this pandemic, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Paul Tret-Green, to the Secretary General and Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, permanent members, alternate members, friends all. Costa Rica very much welcomes this Resolution 1165 and the critical statements that we have heard all day today and this afternoon. But what Costa Rica mostly wishes to trumpet here is the strength of this resolution and how resolutely we are moving forward with it. COVID, I believe everybody understands.
Dirigidas a la protección de las poblaciones, de sus poblaciones y siempre
geared to their populations and always with special emphasis on the vulnerable populations. No doubt the COVID-19 pandemic has brought out the best in human beings with their solidarity and generosity. But in addition, we must recognize that it has also brought out the darker side of human beings as well. We see, and this was said so clearly by Minister Chet Green, of how he noted how our societies have undergone an economic crisis due to the pandemic, and how we also see that throughout these 16 or 18 months of pandemic, the rich have become richer and the poor have become poorer. A correct step that has been taken by this Permanent Council was that Resolution 1165, which brought to the fore the question of access and inequitable access to vaccines. We have discussed this issue today very clearly and with data. And this could be very clearly seen, and I'm going to mention this further on in my remarks. Costa Rica, like all of the countries, has been concerned to gain access to an equitable arrangement for accessing vaccines and bolstering the health of its students by acting multilaterally so that vaccine distribution can be effective and without delay. Costa Rica has had to adapt available national resources to address the exigencies of the pandemic, and the Vice President of Colombia put it so well. No country apart from these donations which have come in recent weeks, no one has given us anything. We have bought the vaccines. We have bought all of the face masks. There has been a striking market in goods related to dealing with the pandemic. The government of Costa Rica has adopted more than 60 measures, which include social protection for different populations, particularly high-risk groups such as children, women, persons with disabilities, older adults, indigenous populations, as was mentioned and quite rightly so by the Vice President of Ecuador, homeless persons, and families living in poverty without turning away from all migrants, independent of their migratory status. Let us recall that the Central American region is a region of mixed migration. There are flows that move from the south northward in light of migration to the United States. To make sure we're all safe, we all have to be safe and vaccinated. Costa Rica has a robust health system that is well structured, that is under pressure, and it has been capable of coordinating a national strategy at the same time, ensuring universal access. Our country is investing almost 6% of its GDP in a universal health system. But that's not the case of all of the countries of the region. For the period from December 2020 to July 2021, Costa Rica has received over 2,800,000 dosages, of which more than 2.5 million doses have been applied, including myself. I was vaccinated yesterday. It is hoped that with the stepping up in the pace of vaccination, it'll be possible to keep the curve, the R factor of the curve of contamination below a certain level. Costa Rica had noted time and again the problem of the inequalities between the most developed and the developing countries. We underscore once again that all processes and initiatives should be based on transparency and the symmetry of negotiations. We issue an appeal to the existing mechanisms for equitable vaccine distribution that expresses the lessons we've learned in this time, that makes it possible to build a more international arrangements that are characterized by greater solidarity so as to be able to increase or improve the distribution of drugs and supplies. And I take this opportunity to congratulate and to express gratitude to the generous contribution that has been made by the government and people of Colombia to CARICOM. We reiterate our words of gratitude for the valuable work of the PAHO and WHO, which have been working with great clarity about the situation we face in the region, and also, above all else, we're grateful that the efforts that international financial institutions are supporting, we're grateful for those efforts to support, particularly to support smaller developing economies, especially the most fragile ones. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to raise a proposal that was made by President Alvarado several months back. Indeed, it was 1 year and 5 months ago. In May of 2020, it's a proposal made to PAHO so that there would be a repository of technologies for fighting COVID-19. Those new approaches are the ones we need to seek out. At that time, the call to appeal won the support of 40 countries. And this is an opportunity I'd like to take advantage of in order to issue an appeal to all countries of the region, but particularly the countries of the Caribbean, to join this appeal of solidarity. This would be a repository in which we must place the new technologies, the vaccines, the new technologies that can help us address pandemics, not just pandemic, but unfortunately the next ones. And so I issue a real appeal so that this repository could include future treatments, technologies, and vaccines, and that it be available to us all. That is to say, we should be able to make sure that the anti-pandemic efforts, as Dr. Etienne says, go hand in hand with the human right to access to health care, and convert the fight against the pandemic and the fight for access to the pandemics and health-related technologies, all of these as a global public good. Logically, we must continue calling for greater solidarity and more international cooperation in the days ahead. But we must continue working in the multilateral arena, raising our voices in this regard. Logically, we are also grateful for the understanding of the United States of America, which, in the face of this situation, this particularly pressing situation, has been generous, making several donations to our country, Costa Rica, but also to many other countries in the region. Finally, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues, I don't think we can say it enough, but the pandemic has put us in a dilemma where it comes to the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, that this not be a lost generation, that this should not set back our commitment to attain those Sustainable Development Goals. And above all else, that the health systems should not somehow be a counterbalance to economic recovery. We need to think about a paradigm. We cannot allow the fight against pandemics to be defined by the market. At this stage of the game, we cannot simply rely on the laws of supply and demand. Access to health is a human right, and vaccines are a global public good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christian. I now give the floor to Mr. Carlos Sáenz, Director General of the Ministry of Health of Nicaragua. And he will talk about the financing for health, among other topics. Minister, if you could please ask for the floor. Dr. Science, you have to request the floor. It's the blue button down to your right. And if you could refresh the browser if you've not been able to ask for the floor, and then come back in. Okay, now here he comes. Can you hear me? We can hear you, but we can't see you. Thank you very much on behalf of Nicaragua. We would like to express gratitude for this opportunity to speak and to discuss the effort that we have been making as a country to see how we can attain highly equitable vaccination, since one of the main problems we've had is that about 80% of the vaccine supply has been hoarded by the developed countries. And this effort that we're making through this special session of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States allows us to attain the level of equity well, Nicaragua, ever since the international emergency was announced 30 January of 2020, we have prepared to address this situation of the pandemic. And thanks to the fact that Nicaragua, with effort that it had been making ever since 2007 up to 2020, well, we have expanded the hospital network in the country, including endowing the hospitals with high-tech equipment and training persons on the critical path of attention. All of this has made it possible for us to better care for persons with COVID. And we have had a relatively limited toll. Also, a couple of months before we began epidemiological surveillance at entry points, which enabled the various institutions to work together with a plan to prepare and respond to the situation. All of this helped us. Nonetheless, we have faced great difficulties in obtaining vaccines, given the lack of availability of them. In terms of the COVAX mechanism, well, thanks to it, we have received an amount that is not as much as the commitment to provide enough for 20% of getting everyone in the country vaccinated by 2021. but we've also had a donation from Sweden. They will be sending us approximately 30,000 doses. And we also look forward to receiving a large number of vaccines, some 6,000 doses from Spain, and through the COVAX mechanism and AMC 92. The commitment is to send us some 6,000 doses of Pfizer and also 135,000 doses of AstraZeneca. The government of Nicaragua has also been making major efforts to obtain vaccines. We've received donations from India and also from Russia, important donations that have been used to vaccinate a significant proportion of the population over age 65, frontline health workers, and also the public sector workers, and other frontline state institutions. And as we're sold more vaccine, we hope to have greater coverage. Our commitment, like Ecuador, is to achieve major coverage from now until the end of the year, so as to be able to secure the collective immunity that we hope to attain before the end of the year. Also, through the revolving funds for countries of the Americas, we've sought additional vaccines. And in coming days, we look to reviewing procurement mechanisms and we would urge that all the member states continue to struggle for this vaccine equity and continue struggling so that there can be more production so that we can attain this immunity. At this time, Nicaragua, in addition to the voluntary measures we've been adopting in relation to vaccination, through our community-based healthcare model, we're also seeking to have early detection of cases so as to be able to begin treatment early on and thus avoid the complications of cases that might need to be hospitalized. Also, we are promoting preventive education during home visits and in the media to make sure that preventive measures continue to be used, including frequent hand washing, the use of face masks, and social distancing. So thank you very much. And we hope that all of us together will continue seeking that vaccine equity, considering that this is the main problem that we developing countries have had during this pandemic, that we've not been allowed to have sufficient access to protect the population of us developing countries. Thank you very much.
Excellent. We have now, says the chair, listened to our guest speakers, and I am offering the floor. And I do, with greatest respect, urge everyone to be mindful of time. I am clicking the list. We have Lucelina Varros, the ambassador for Mexico, first up. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are deeply honored to have such a stellar gathering of high dignitaries of our member states, beginning with the Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia. We here have also focused on inequity and all of the unfairness and the manner in which these matters are being handled throughout the world. We want to reduce deaths. Last February 17th, Mexico celebrated the adoption of the Permanent Council's resolution 1135, reiterated its commitment to the aspirations of that document. We believe it is essential to have a clear message of cohesion and solidarity go forth. At that time, Marcelo Ebrard, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Mexico, participated in the debate on access to COVID-19 vaccines at the Council of the United Nations. And he pointed to the fact that we had never seen anything affect so many in such a short time, and how critical it was to reverse the unfairness and inequity, because quite frankly, the health and the future of humanity at large hangs in the balance. And so Mexico defends multilateralism as the key and inexorable instrument whereby we must go forward. In April, back of 2020, we pushed very hard at the UN for Resolution 274, international cooperation to guarantee access to vaccine and medical equipment to fight the COVID-19, which was backed by a majority of the members of the UN. At that time, Mexico expressed its commitment to multilateralism as the inevitable and essential ingredient in our fight for fairness. We exhorted various mechanisms to do what needed to be done to push on the supply chain as much as possible to promote and protect universal coverage in an effective and timely manner, not only of the vaccine, but other essential inputs to fight this pandemic, because it's not over yet. My country has maintained that resolute posture from the beginning. We believe in peace, we believe in multilateralism, and we certainly treasure individual human life. And that is why we welcome any discussion on COVAX, the Gavi alliances, and other international movements that are pulling in that direction. Now, this resolution that we're discussing here is intimately linked with the manner in which these vaccines will be distributed throughout the region. We have the very pertinent case of Argentina, where the labeling, the packaging, and the distribution of millions of AstraZeneca is now happening and being distributed as I speak. The biologicals that are necessary as well has given us to 7 authorized vaccines in order to move forward under this aegis of mobilizing in health emergencies. The Chinese virus and the Moderna virus are, I should say vaccine, the interpreter corrects herself, of course, are other examples. What we now have is the broadest portfolio of vaccines in Latin America and amongst the 3 greatest ones in the world. 66 million have been distributed in the national territory of Mexico. We're aiming for October, wherein the population above 28 years of age will all have been vaccinated. That's the goal. Clearly, we have the important component, which would include the development of vaccines in Mexico. We have biologicals, and we have a vaccine that is in the last stages of clinical testing, which we call Patria, that is homeland, Patria. And we will be sharing it with Latin America and the Caribbean as soon as it's given the green light. That is a keystone of Mexican foreign affairs. When I say that, I mean, of course, solidarity. Mexico needs vaccines, it needs inputs, but it is well aware that despite our own pressures, the fact that all of this has been distributed in such a disproportionate manner exhorts us all to step up and and insist on solidarity and fairness. We don't have the situation resolved in our country, but we still want to look beyond our own borders. Sometimes this sort of cooperation responds to reciprocity. Other times it is rooted simply in solidarity, in compassion, in having the heart to put yourself in the position of those who are suffering. That's where we stand, and we hope to continue to do so with solidarity and responsibility. Cooperation is the ray, and this is what we have felt since we've had the pro tem Secretary of CELA, the Community of Caribbean and Latin American Affairs. We are working on any number of different aspects. Some are matters are produced, articles are produced in Mexico, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Cuba, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, and El Salvador, Honduras, Paraguay, the Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago have all been covered. We in CELAC have been pushing decidedly for the forging of strategic alliances so that we can strengthen the effectiveness of our national calls. And we are very much exhorting international pharmaceutical interests to make the COVID-19 vaccines available under the aegis of a global good. We want to look at emergent diseases and emergencies and regional clinical studies on various different pathologies that are linked to COVID-19 as matters of great interest. More strategic alliances, more studies on the pandemic, and covering related issues such as food security. But above and beyond the economic, social, health, and security issues, frankly, the pandemic has put us squarely in front of an ethical dilemma. We need to put the health of human beings above any other consideration, and that is why Manuel López Obrador, the President of the Republic of Mexico, has supported this call. We reiterate the call to promote just and inclusive and sustainable economic recovery, above all fairness in the distribution of vaccines, so that we can prevent and overcome the indubitable future pandemics that are ahead. Let's do it in a manner that respects life and dignity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Pleased to give the floor now to the Ambassador for Panama, Maria Roquever-Guillon. Thank you, Chair, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General. We would like to applaud those who have pushed for this special session of the Permanent Council, and also, of course, hail the presence among us of Her Excellency Marta Lucía Ramírez, Vice President and Chancellor of the Republic of Colombia, the presence of His Excellency, the Vice President of Ecuador, Alfredo Borrero Vega, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Paul Chet-Green of Antigua and Barbuda, and others. And last but not least, of course, for our esteemed Dr. Carissa Etienne, who has certainly been the clarion call that we have been hearing from day one when the pandemic hit us. Chair, this continues to be a very tough challenge worldwide. The preparation under emergency circumstances of so much material is, of course, uplifting, but we're not out of the woods yet, you see. We cannot ignore the fact that advance forward movement in our struggle against COVID has been very, very unequal. Some countries are way ahead in their vaccination programs. Others haven't even put one shot in one arm. And this pattern of terrific inequality is in and of itself generating, as everybody knows, variants which will affect us all. It's very short-term thinking. We must do better, particularly remembering the people who live in the farthest and most remote areas of this earth. As it has been pointed out, no one is safe till everybody is safe. And many have indeed put thought, effort, and treasure to producing and distributing COVID-19. As we know, the World Alliance for Immunization and all other coalitions that have been put together in assistance with WHO, PAHO, we know that there are distributions that are equitable, that are sure, that are safe, and therefore we know that one of the best options for low-income countries is the COVAX. The pandemic has occasioned the death of so many millions and ongoing disease of numbers of others, not to mention the loss of economic wealth and so much other. Particularly hard hit, needed to be said, are the low-income countries. In all of these circumstances, fair access to the vaccine is essential to move forward, and that is why the government of Panama stands absolutely committed to a global and equitable access of the COVID-19 vaccine that will come to the aid of the developing countries. The availability of that vaccine within the COVAX program and the efforts of our country to ensure that continues will do more for global immunity than anything else. We certainly stand with ongoing readiness with the global community and our own regional community so that the vaccine can be considered a global good. And we speak for transparency, equity, and the availability of this good with high priority for all. I cannot close without thanking the commitment shown by Joe Biden, President of the United States, for the sharing of so many vaccines with the world. Many here, including Panama, have benefited. Panama will today get 500,000 vaccines from Pfizer. And so we greet and we salute him, and we also greet and salute Colombia for Colombia's commitment to the CARICOM countries. Thank you. Let's keep going, says the chair. I'm sorry to have to say it, but remember that we no longer have 7 minutes. We're down to the 5-minute mark. I'm sorry to keep insisting on this, but it's a dense day and a dense subject. So please let everyone do what is possible to keep to the 5-minute limit. Ambassador Luis Alvarado of Nicaragua has the floor. Thank you. I will be mindful of your call, Chair, and I do perfectly well remember our revising the rules of procedure of the organization to bring down our time of intervention to 5 minutes in exigent circumstances. The Government for the Reconciliation and National Unity of Nicaragua greets the distinguished guests that have spoken to us today and applauds them for the various progress made. The Director General of the World Health Organization earlier this year had started saying that of 220 countries and economies, 194 had already started vaccinating their populations, and 26 no. More than 700 million doses of these vaccines have been administered, but more than 87% have gone to high-income countries or high middle-income countries, whereas the low-income countries have only got the 0.2%. So, on average, in the high-income countries, 1 of 4 persons has been vaccinated, while in the low-income countries, it's more like 1 in 500. Now, this is what Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization, has told us. It's not myself telling you this. So this naturally speaks to the ongoing inequity that exists in the world and that necessarily affects those who are less able to defend themselves the most. We're talking, of course, also of the frontline health workers and the people who are most vulnerable. You know who they are. And alas, the politicization of this business of the vaccine distribution has not made things any easier, because there's an alarming inequality in terms of the distribution. And as Dr. Carissa Etienne, for whom we deeply thank for her report, we have read that the epicenter of the pandemic and the lack of available vaccines against COVID-19 created a genuine challenge to the countries in the region as regarded health coverage of the population, its installed hospital capacity, affecting also tourism, trade, and society at large. We recognize the extraordinary work that PAHO has carried out in the region, and we have focused on its recommendations, intensifying the capacity of states to halt the propagation of the coronavirus in the region. And that is one of our main objectives in Nicaragua, and I'm sure it is for all of us. At the same time, of course, we haven't forgotten other communicable diseases. But certainly one of the lessons to be derived from this experience is the imperative need to have universal health coverage, a system that will be able to kick in immediately when there's a serious health emergency that emerges, and which will certainly place the safety of human life at the center of its concerns. Another example of best practices is the application of various modes of communication to the population. It's important to get the word out. And at the national level, we have really done well in that regard in Nicaragua. Nicaragua has exhorted the members of the international community who bought maybe a surplus number of vaccine to please share that surplus with the rest of us who don't have enough. We have worked multilaterally and sometimes unilaterally to look again at the so-called sanctions that really, in the current context, represent nothing less, in our judgment, than crimes against humanity. We have 100,000 several vaccines of AstraZeneca through COVAX. We're deeply grateful for that. Grateful to the Kingdom of Spain for donating 97,200 and some to Nicaragua. And through PAHO, we thank also those who are offering additional hundreds of thousands of doses and the donations that we have received. It's only through the promotion of peace and international security that we have any hope of moving forward and getting above and beyond this international health crisis. We have got to somehow emerge from the extreme politicization that has occurred and continue operating and collaborating with each other as the brothers that we are. And Chair, I hope you note I stayed within the time. Thank you very, very much. The representative of the Dominican Republic is next. Ambassador Josue Fiallo. Thank you, Chair, Your Excellency, Marta Lucia Ramirez, Vice President and Chancellor of the Republic of Colombia, Your Excellency Alfredo Borrero Vega, Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador, and other high authorities present here, Dr. Carissa Etienne, Director of PAHO, Honorable Secretary General and Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, esteemed colleagues and ambassadors. Let me begin by expressing the deep gratitude of the Dominican Republic for all of the statements that have been made today that have, as one, supported what was approved last February 17th by the Permanent Council in the call for equity in the distribution of vaccines. We have a cross-cutting approach to virtually everything we've discussed in the last 17 months. Whatever it is we've been discussing at the OAS, there's been a notable oneness. And one of the issues, of course, that has been most arresting is the inequitable access to the vaccines. We, of course, are concerned by that, but also by other challenges that have arisen just in the last couple of months. We have seen, however, solidarity shown by countries and partners that has very much gratified us. We also appreciate the help from the Inter-American Development Bank and the Pan American Health Organization that has so assisted us in facing the social and health crisis that we are going through. And with that very precious help, we on our own hand have been put together a national plan for vaccines in the Dominican Republic. We hope to vaccinate about 8 million people this year in 2021. To date, nearly 9 million have been vaccinated, either with 1 or 2 doses. And so moving forward in our vaccination plan has been, frankly, very useful in lowering contagion and helping to jumpstart certain areas of the economy. That said, we remain concerned by what remains to be done. We cannot drop our guard, not to mention the new variants of the virus, the totally irresponsible disinformation that is still out there. The internet, the social networks, several media that go on and on about various theories about the vaccine is frankly killing people. And it is affecting our very determined efforts to move forward with our countries. Now, the Dominican Republic can only call on all of civil society, churches, trade unions, you name it. Everybody that can do so needs to gather and, as one, fight these challenges, and particularly the disinformation. We need to face this as the great struggle it is for humanity at large. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ambassador. The Ambassador for Canada has the floor. Ambassador Hugh Adsett. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the Mission of Colombia for requesting today's special session of the Permanent Council. Let me also thank those who participated on the very important panel that we heard from this afternoon. Ms. Angela Ospina, Her Excellency Martha Lucia Ramirez, His Excellency the Honorable Paul Chet Green, and of course Dr. Crisa Etienne. We gathered in February in this organization to recognize the need for international cooperation in our fight against COVID-19. Today's a chance to gather again to take stock of what's been accomplished and what is left to do. Let me begin by saying that Canada is committed to working with its partners and international organizations to control the spread of COVID-19 around the world. This is vital to helping those who are affected by the pandemic and to protecting their health and safety. Canada strongly supports equitable global access to COVID-19 vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. In order to achieve this, we're working hand in hand with the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, better known as the ACT Accelerator, and the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access Facility, or better known in English as the COVAX Facility. This is an enormous undertaking. Since February of 2020, Canada has committed more than $2.5 billion in international assistance in response to COVID-19. This includes $1.3 billion for the ACT Accelerator. We also recognize that a limited supply of COVID-19 vaccines is hindering equitable access to vaccines. We've been working collaboratively with others, including governments, multilateral institutions, such as the Pan American Health Organization, and industry to identify and to remove bottlenecks and to accelerate the production and equitable distribution of affordable, safe, effective COVID-19 vaccines and other medical countermeasures. In addition, we have also committed to share vaccine doses with low and middle income countries through the COVAX facility. Last month, we made a commitment to share 13 million doses through the COVAX facility. Last week, we committed to donate an additional 17.7 million doses for a total of more than 30 million vaccine doses. These 30 million doses will be delivered directly from the manufacturer to receiving countries. This contribution will help accelerate deliveries to low and lower middle income countries, including in the Caribbean and Latin America. Mr. Chair, I want to underline that these are initial contributions. Some of these initial doses are expected to be available right away to address urgent needs around the world, with more doses becoming available for distribution later this year. In addition to sharing doses through the COVAX facility, there are other important things to be done. We are also supporting other critical work to facilitate readiness and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines in Latin America and the Caribbean. Canada is contributing $50 million to the Pan American Health Organization, a reliable and trusted partner to all of us in this time of crisis, for that work. Mr. President, a couple more words and I'll continue in French. Notre contribution sera axée sur les populations en situation de vulnérabilité et défavorisées de mer.
We will continue to favor assistance to Latin America and the Caribbean, and Canada will look particularly at being able to import the vaccine against COVID-19 and to reach out to the population, women particularly, who are in positions of vulnerability. Let me end with the following 3 points. Canada and supports and very much encourages the intervention of other manufacturers in this field, particularly the idea of transferring technology so that other companies that are able so to do can continue the same manufacturing process at the same standards and come up with effective and a sufficient number of vaccines. In light of what we have lived, we are committed to see absolutely solid commitment so that we can do better in this regard. You may be sure that Canada will continue to be a trustworthy partner in the region as regards access to vaccines. And as the pandemic evolves, we will continue to evolve and will find the necessary solutions so that all in the America may benefit. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Hugh. Tiene la palabra por Uruguay, ministro.
Thank you, Hugh. I now give the floor to Fernando Sotelo of Uruguay. Thank you, Chairman. This delegation would like to thank and highlight each and every one of the very illustrative remarks made by the high-level authorities who have honored us with their participation in this special session of the Permanent Council. Uruguay would also like to reiterate once again its concern over equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. In this regard, we would highlight the importance of international solidarity for addressing the pandemic and the additional challenge that stems from the rise of new variants. To date, in Uruguay, 69% of the population has had at least one dose, and 57% have had 2 doses. These percentages are increased if one takes account of certain age brackets. It's at 90% in all persons over 75 years of age. Uruguay was also the first country in the region to vaccinate young persons ages 12 to 16 years old. In line with the development of the epidemiological situation and the reduction in the number of cases, the country is resuming a number of in-person activities, such as gradual return to classes, as of last May 9th. It's important to note that Uruguay wishes to recognize the generosity of the countries of the region that have contributed by donating vaccines to the above noted accomplishments. Finally, we would also like to note that it is fundamental that we make efficient and joint use of resources, and we also need to give a priority to the international and regional health architecture through WHO and COVAX and through PAHO, envisioning greater effectiveness in the near future. Thank you very much, Chair. Ambassador Gustavo Tarre, Venezuela, you have the floor. My delegation is grateful to the government of Colombia for requesting that this special session of the Permanent Council be held, and it would also like to thank the persons who have spoken during the session for their remarks. The speakers and the ambassadors who have spoken have reported on the efforts being made in their respective countries to vaccinate hundreds of millions of persons. With great sadness, I must say that the situation of the pandemic and the vaccination situation in Venezuela has not improved substantially compared to the last time we spoke on this matter in this council. Venezuela does not yet have a national vaccination plan, and the Nicolás Maduro dictatorship does not offer figures on persons who have caught the disease or number who's vaccinated. We know that very few are being vaccinated and not well. The interim government and the usurping dictatorship reached an agreement on availability of vaccinations in Venezuela. The National Assembly approved $130 million to finance access of Venezuela to the COVAX mechanism and to the cold chains mechanisms for distributing the vaccine. On 10 April, the dictatorship said that it had made a payment. Then in April, it announced a second payment. And there was still an outstanding balance to be paid that has not yet been paid. And as a result, no vaccine from the COVAX system has entered Venezuela. Unfortunately, the technical roundtable, the mechanism set up by the Pan American Health Organization, UNICEF, the medical and nurses associations at the Ministry of Health to coordinate the response to the pandemic and develop the national vaccination plan. Well, that meeting did not continue on a regular basis, and the usurper government did not maintain its financial commitment. We're alarmed that the mechanisms for distributing available vaccinations have been shaped by politics and corruption. The partisans of the government are given priority for vaccination, and a black market has been established that means that the vaccine is available to those who can pay large sums of money. Vaccine inequity is not only among countries, but also within a given country. Moreover, the dictatorship has insisted on turning Venezuelans into guinea pigs for the Cuban regime, but with the Nicolás Maduro's announcement of the intention to apply the Abdala vaccine from Cuba to be a scientific, not well proven scientifically, to children. Despite the obstacles put up by the usurper dictatorship, the Guaido interim government has continued in its duty to make vaccines available to all Venezuelans without any political consideration coming any limitation. So we insist on exploring any avenue for cooperation that may exist, and we hope to be able to announce gains very soon. In the meantime, we would tell the usurper dictatorship to stop playing with the lives of Venezuelans, to carry out the commitments it has taken on, and to guarantee the right to health beyond subaltern political considerations. Finally, Chairman, I'd like to thank the governments of the hemisphere who have vaccinated and continue vaccinating Venezuelan migrants. That is all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ambassador Tarre. And I now give the floor to the United States, Brad Frieden.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We would like to also thank Colombia for requesting this special meeting and to express our appreciation for the panelists' excellent presentations. To follow up on the resolution concerning equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, my delegation would like to provide a brief, and I will emphasize brief, update on U.S. efforts in the COVID-19 response. Equitable global distribution of safe and effective vaccines is the only way to defeat the COVID-19 pandemic. That's why in February of this year, President Biden announced a $2 billion contribution to support COVAX. As of July 16th, 15 countries in the Western Hemisphere have received over 24 million vaccine doses from the United States directly, including Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. The United States is the largest contributor to COVAX, which has provided vaccines to Caribbean countries, including Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Belize, Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. We're also close to reaching an agreement with CAPFA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, that will allow us to donate more vaccines directly to Caribbean countries. We will continue to donate additional vaccine doses globally across the coming months as supply becomes available, work with U.S. vaccine manufacturers to increase vaccine supply for the rest of the world, and work with partners to expand global vaccine production and manufacturing capacity to beat this pandemic and to prepare and respond to future threats. Importantly, our shots don't come with strings attached. We are sharing vaccines with the world and leading in a global vaccine strategy because it's the right thing to do. The right thing morally, the right thing from a global public health perspective, and the right thing for our collective security and well-being. The United States will also continue to take an active role in responding to COVID-19 by providing training for frontline healthcare workers, providing assistance to address second-order impacts, and advancing research and development for treatments, tests, and vaccines. To quote President Biden, the United States will be the world's arsenal of vaccines in our shared fight against this virus, unquote. The United States has committed to do all we can to build a world that is safer and more secure against the threat of infectious disease. Again, thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to provide an update on this important issue.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Nunes of the delegation of Brazil is recognized. Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I would like to pay my compliments to the high-level authorities who have participated in this meeting. At the same time, as we extend our words of gratitude to the Colombian mission for the initiative of convening this special session on such an important topic. The high-level authorities of Colombia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and Antigua and Barbuda, and Dr. Carissa Etienne, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, Chairman, distinguished representatives. Initially, I'd like to express gratitude for this session being called on a topic that is of the utmost importance for our whole region at the current moment. Brazil is satisfied that the draft resolution on equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines was approved by acclamation last February. We also think it's important that the text recognizes general principles established by the framework of the World Health Organization for fair and equitable access to health products in fighting COVID-19. The fact is that the pandemic exposed the fragilities in the national health systems as well as the limitation in global chains of medical supplies and goods. We would like to recognize the unprecedented significance of the COVAX facility as a mechanism for providing fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccine. Nonetheless, I must note that COVAX faced many difficulties when it has come to delivering the vaccines. The lack of supply led to a nationalist crisis that led to extreme imbalances in access to vaccinations. High-income countries that account for 16% of the world population signed agreements to purchase 4.9 billion doses, which is 70% of the output of the most advanced laboratories, most advanced in terms of the process of producing the vaccines. I recall that 3.6 billion doses of the vaccine have already been administered globally, whereas only 1.1% of persons in low-income countries have received at least one dose, which shows the dramatic disparity among the countries. Mr. Chairman, Ambassador Abdallah, in the context of the pandemic, defending fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, it must be read in light of the epidemiological picture of the disease. COVAX, however, did not take into account epidemiological criteria in its distribution. The countries of the Americas, which account for 47% of all deaths, received only 24% of the vaccines distributed by the mechanism. I would also like to indicate that the shortage of vaccines shows the excessive dependence of our region on the import of essential drugs and supplies. Less than 4% of medical products in use during the COVID-19 response came from our own region. It is essential that we work to expand the region's capacity to manufacture strategic medical products such as vaccines. I take this opportunity to briefly share in summary form of the current situation of the immunization campaign against COVID-19 in Brazil. To date, the Ministry of Health has already distributed more than 150 million doses to the states, and of these, more than 120 million doses have been applied. The method of the Ministry of Health, or the goal is to vaccinate everyone over age 18. We're talking about some 158 million persons with the first dose by September of this year. Last June, the Osvaldo Cruz Foundation signed agreements to transfer technology with AstraZeneca, which makes possible national production in Brazil of the active principle, which is essential for producing vaccines in the country. The expectation of the first 100% Brazilian doses, they're expected to be delivered in October. In addition to the successful experience, Brazil has committed to international organizations, particularly the WHO, with a view to planning multilateral and consensus-based solutions that are short-term and pragmatic to contribute to boost the production and distribution of vaccines. In any scenario, it will be fundamental to have commitment, participation, and partnership with different sectors of technology for the production of vaccines, so as to use the production and ensure production not only in Brazil, but in other developing countries as well. I note that in this inter-American system, we are characterized, as several speakers have said, by efforts to mitigate the crisis. Particularly, this has been true particularly of the work done by the Pan American Health Organization. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to conclude by noting that Brazil makes available and will make available its productive capability to the region to step up the production of diagnostic kits, treatments, and vaccines through technical cooperation and transfer of technology. Thank you very much. Ambassador Noel Lynch of Barbados, you have the floor.
Many thanks to you, Mr. Chair. First, let me thank the delegation of Colombia for requesting this very important session this afternoon. And I extend my thanks to the high-level authorities that have graced us with their presence this evening as well. First, I thank, obviously, Madam Vice President, La Senora Marta Lucia Ramirez of Colombia. And I thank two of our own, Dr. Carissa Etienne, the Director General of PAHO, for her report and for her continued sterling work in regards to this pandemic and how we deal with it. And I also wish to extend greetings to Minister Chet Green of Antigua and Barbuda. First, the government and the people of Barbados thank the government and people of Colombia for literally putting their money where their mouth is. This donation that their government has made goes a long way to saving and protecting lives and livelihoods of the people of the Caribbean community. We cannot thank you enough for your generous gesture. This act, one of solidarity and a true expression of multilateralism at work, demonstrates how to truly assist in cementing democracy and assisting in our development. Democracy, I hasten to add, is more than just the holding of fair and free elections every 4 or 5 years or some other period. What has no doubt triggered this act is the tabling and the passage of the resolution on the equitable distribution of vaccines tabled by the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda in February, endorsed by all of the CARICOM delegations in this August body and passed by acclamation in the Permanent Council meeting. As we thank the government and the people of Colombia, we also need to thank the United States of America and Canada for their assistance and their continued work at diligently seeking to assist the people of CARICOM. We are much aware, however, that lots more needs to be done to get us anywhere near the herd immunity that we need to get our economies fully reopened and our livelihoods and lives more secure. The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, has called for the establishment of an international clearinghouse for the sourcing and equitable distribution of these life-saving drugs. Vaccines are a global public good and should be readily accessible to all citizens of the world, no matter where they are found and no matter their socio-economic circumstances. It cannot be that small and middle-income countries have to be the victims of middlemen in circumstances where global pharmaceutical companies are stating that they only deal with countries. In reality, they have dealt with very few small countries and have our countries dealing with middlemen who are peddling these vaccines at a premium. The establishment of the clearinghouse will, both in terms of restrictors, now even 19 months later, will allow us to better coordinate and to counter this race against the variants. Please be reminded that the Delta variant is taking its toll on those who are unvaccinated. Over 600,000 people in Latin America and the Caribbean have died from this virus. The world came together in 1945 to solve the problems of that time. A similar approach is needed now. The world must now pause and bring global leadership and coordination to the issues of how we contain COVID-19 in the poorer and the developing world. How do we allow renewed global movement? How do we ensure equitable distribution of vaccines? How do we resume growth that is green, resilient, and that is inclusive? Global moral strategic leadership is necessary at this time. We are actually surprised that there has been no global summit on the COVID-19 pandemic. It is still not too late to convene such a gathering for a disease that continues to evolve. COVID will continue to be with us for a long time to come. The OAS can bring its globally respected voice to these calls. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm obliged to you.
Tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the OAS, Her Excellency Martha Lucia Ramirez, Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, the Honorable Paul Green, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Immigration of Antigua and Barbuda, His Excellency Nestor Mendez, Assistant Secretary General, Dr. Carissa Etienne, Director of PAHO, ambassadors, permanent representatives, and alternate representatives. Good afternoon. Like those before me, Mr. Chairman, I thank the delegation of Colombia for convening this special session. I take this opportunity to congratulate the government and people of Colombia on their attainment of another year of independence. On behalf of the government and people of Jamaica, I express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to the government of Colombia for their generous gift of vaccines to the sub-region from which Jamaica stands to benefit. This gift is indeed a clear manifestation of your solidarity with our plight to secure vaccines in a timely manner in our fight in this unprecedented pandemic. The gift comes at an important juncture, which will certainly go a far way as we seek to shore up the number of persons vaccinated with a view to reaching herd immunity. Mr. Chairman, I must also use this opportunity to thank the government of Mexico and others, including the United States and Canada, which have either donated or pledged donations of vaccines to Jamaica. Our thanks are also extended to Dr. Etienne for her comprehensive report earlier this morning, and to her team at PAHO for their tremendous effort throughout this challenging period. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The alternate representative of Paraguay, Raul Martinez, is recognized. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Paraguay is grateful for the holding of this special session of the Permanent Council. We can't hear you. I am hearing him. Yes. Can you hear me now, Chairman? Chairman, can you hear me? Chairman, can you hear me? Mr. Martinez, you're actually okay, says the technician. I think it's the chairman who's having difficulty. I'm in your hands. Give me just a moment, please. Let's do the following. While you refresh. No, let's be clear. I can't hear the representative of Paraguay. Because of that, I will give the floor to the representative for Argentina, and in the meantime, you can fix the technical problem. Go ahead, Ambassador. Very well. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the presentations. Initially, I had some doubts about, or I was hesitant to speak of some of Argentina's accomplishment at the same time as there are so many difficulties. Just a moment, Carlos, we're not able to hear you. We're not able to hear you. I'm writing the chair, says the technician. Let's see if he sees it in the chat. Go ahead, Carlos. Okay? Chairman, can you hear me now? Chairman, can you hear me? I think he can't hear you, but we can still hear you. We're trying to get him to read the chats so that he can refresh his browser. I am going to refresh, but I have sound here, so please go ahead, Carlos. So let me begin once again. I simply wanted to express gratitude for the presentations and say that initially I was hesitant about speaking because I felt a bit shy about talking about my government's accomplishments when there are still so many unmet needs in this region. But I'll be very brief. Though it might seem like a lie, up until 2015, our country had a Ministry of Health and a Ministry of Science and Technology. You can imagine the importance of those two ministries in the context of what we're facing today. Now, those ministries were eliminated, and we just recovered them in late 2019. And that made it possible, among other things, for us to be very proud to first contribute to a component of the vaccine and then to produce it together with the Brittman laboratory. It made it possible for our hospital system to not collapse, and it enabled a invaluable cooperation among the medical personnel. Together with the government of Mexico for the AstraZeneca vaccine, the Abdala and Sovereign vaccines from Cuba, and Cosino Farm, which has meant that this week we're completing 40 million vaccine doses in our country. And the last one was the agreement to achieve, first of all, 3.5 million Moderna vaccines in the context of 20 million that are in the context of this long-term long-term agreement. But even so, these asymmetries that have been denounced in this session persist. First is the asymmetry as between rich countries and poor countries. But the most profound, perhaps, is that both the most powerful and the least powerful states in a common position in multilateral organizations, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, G20, and the OAS. Well, we asked with a clear majority that the patents be lifted and that the vaccines be treated as a global public good rather than as merchandise or commodity in the market. And we've not yet attained that. That is to say, there is a debt in respect of multilateralism, a debt in terms of the policy vis-a-vis the major financial groups. For this reason, I can continue pointing out accomplishments of our government, but what is the situation? We continue facing the risk of new strains. We continue having to keep the borders closed. We have so many millions of human beings in the region and worldwide who are not receiving any attention, who are not being vaccinated. Now, to conclude, what I do feel proud of is that our country did not get into the game of geopolitical interests in relation to vaccination for two reasons. First, because the individual, the specific human being, doesn't really care where the vaccine is coming from. They just want the vaccine. And the second, because it's a show of independence and sovereignty, and that our country is free to enter into agreements with every country in the world, any country in the world, in light of our people's interests and not based on any geopolitical pressure. That is all. Thank you very much.
I'm wondering whether the chair is reconnected. The answer appears to be yes. We're asking the chair to please ask for the floor. I think he's coming in now, says Fernando. Well, I'm deeply apologetic, had a problem with my own connectivity, and I especially apologize to Paraguay, whom I blamed for the problem, thinking it came from that corner, but no, it was at my end. So Paraguay, by all means, go ahead. Well, here I am, Chair, says Paraguay. So let me take this opportunity to applaud the holding of this special session of the Permanent Council, particularly as this hemisphere is engaged in nothing less than a transcendental struggle for equity in the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Paraguay understands very clearly that any measure taken to palliate this pandemic needs to be bolstered by equitable access to our populations and by our populations. This is not simply vague generosity. We're talking about the means to cut short the ongoing challenge of additional infection from the additional variants. Now, we are going to start vaccinating people above 20 years of age and those with particular comorbidities. Many, even in this organization, and we thank them, thought it essential to hold high the banner of solidarity, and we stand with them. For a country like my own, which does have resources, continues to have difficulty at the time when we're trying to nail the final contracts and get necessary doses, that is a wonderful, wonderful achievement. And what Colombia has announced today, the $1 million that we're getting through the COVAX for the Caribbean countries, it is excellent news. We are also launching a very well thought out program in every one of our health districts. We have massive vaccination centers to which the population keeps coming because everybody has a sense of responsibility and the understanding that each person has to do his or her own bit. The number of dead continue to weigh on us, people getting sick. We understand how important it is to ground ourselves in science and not rumor and technical cooperation. So we are hopeful that our countries will soon return to normalcy. Thanks very much. Thank you, Raul. And yet again, I'm terribly sorry to have cut you short earlier, says the chair. Can't hear the chair. I'm sorry. Could you, Chair, yet again ask for the floor? Maybe that'll do it. Are we good? Yes, yes. You can be heard, Chair. Are you seeing me, dear friends? Yes, says Fernando. We see you, we hear you, and you can go on. Well, I see you, but I can't hear a thing. Says Nestor, are you hearing me? Yes, nodding the head. So let me give the floor to France. It's a connectivity issue. What can I say? It's the time of day. It hits us at this time of day. France, please go ahead. We cannot hear the ambassador for France. Can you hear me now? She says, yes, ma'am, go ahead. Well, thank you very much indeed. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much indeed, and thank you to Colombia also for having put this issue before us today, and the Vice President of Colombia, the Vice President of Ecuador, and the Minister of Costa Rica, and the representation of Nicaragua. As you know, France believes in multilateralism. It's in our marrow. And we also stand for an equitable distribution of the vaccines. We're trying to help the most vulnerable countries through the European Union, of course, to which we are one of the main contributors, and also through the COVAX initiative, where we stepped in and took an initiative back in 2001, way back when. Now, solidarity, which is being called for even as I speak, is of course the name of the game, and we're doing our part through that multilateral COVAX mechanism that aims to distribute the vaccine in the 111 countries that have joined in that facility, including the DMC, the 10 countries of the Americas that come into the category where they can get the vaccine freely. Now, as was previously pointed out, COVAX has been facing a dearth of vaccines because of problems in the manufacturing in one of our main supplier countries. And that's why France has launched a main huge initiative in terms of the doses. When we joined with Gavi, a number of countries, including mine, expressed the hope that certain procedures could be streamlined and that we could absolutely concentrate on the countries that are, as I speak, the most needy. And we fully support the points made by my good friend Carissa Etienne to that extent and in that regard. The G5, the G20, the European Union is doing much as we are, sharing our doses available with the most vulnerable, including those 10 countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. We, through the G20, offered more than 20 million doses in 2020. We also have a financial contribution, $120 million to COVAX for low-income and fragile countries, fragile economies. This had already been targeted since 2020, but in May, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, talked about more than $600 million, not only for the purchase of vaccines, but also to put sufficient doses into the humanitarian efforts of COVAX and the additional efforts that would lead to the manufacturing of additional doses. The doses that France has donated then through COVAX is now 4 million doses in total. In total, we are committed to share at least 150 million doses between now and the end of 2021. Those European doses through COVAX are beginning to help the AMC countries, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and are also, we believe, instrumental in loosening and softening the constraints that so many countries have been receiving, including those receiving donations while they await the arrival of the doses they desperately need, but won't be there until the fall. So in the short term, friends, and I think this was said clearly by Carissa Etienne also, we have got to strengthen our medical systems, our health systems, to make them more resilient, to make them tougher. And we are certainly going to be promoting a revamping of the international health system going through the universal health coverage that will include prevention, detection, prevention of pandemics. And that is the initiative that France is going to be launching, and it's rooted in a better distribution of vaccines in the world and a bolstering of regional alliances, particularly in Latin America, that has the necessary production capacity. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, to name but these. This time, a type of international solidarity is a bit delayed, and we deeply regret that. But better late than never, and we are absolutely determined to double up our efforts and be there and encourage you and move forward. Thank you.
A ti, muchas gracias. Por España, Concepción Figuerola tiene la palabra.
Secretario General adjunto, altas autoridades nacionales, representantes permanentes alternos, colegas. Quiero en primer lugar agradecer la convocatoria de esta sesión extraordinaria.
I'd like to thank the Mission of Colombia for asking for this special session. 7.5 million COVAX doses have been announced by the President of Spain just recently, and this is our firm commitment to do what Spain can to face this crisis. But while it goes through the necessary assistance in terms of vaccines, that isn't the end of it. We are fully committed, as you well know, to all of Latin America and the Caribbean. As has been repeatedly stated, that region of the world has been particularly hard hit. And the specificities with regard to each country are being looked at on the basis of technical criteria and the various epidemiological data that the COVAX mechanism has. Spain has given priority to Latin America and the Caribbean, and progressively we intend to put additional doses of the vaccine to COVAX until we get the 12.5 million that we have earmarked for the world. Thank you. The chair. Well, I'm hoping very much that we can all hear each other. I think everyone on my list of speakers has spoken, and it has been a very fruitful exercise, a very illuminating one. And so, dear colleagues, I don't know whether the Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General wants to speak. I will be glad to offer the floor to anyone yet wishing to intervene. Cannot hear that. We have him now. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, says Secretary General, let me begin by expressing immense satisfaction for everything we have heard and learned at this important meeting, this special session, which really goes to what we all know to be true. This is the time to show solidarity. This is the time to march shoulder to shoulder in the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why everything that we have heard today is so heartwarming. It's clear, is it not, to all of us, that that's the way forward. We don't have to think about which way we need to go. This is the way. Now we need to look to see that what we have engaged, what we have set in motion, will indeed be reaffirmed and seen through to its natural conclusion, so that this region can do what it can do to overcome this pandemic. This has been the hardest hit region in the world with the hardest number of victims and deaths, and we hope to do what we need to get past that. Thank you, Secretary, says the chair. Let me suggest the following. We are going to end this meeting now. I thank you very, very much, with the understanding that after a few minutes we will again meet to end the regular meeting that we interrupted this morning. So we are going at this moment to conclude our special session. Give us a couple of minutes to fine-tune the technicalities and then resume this morning's meeting. So we will remain in the screen. The Assistant Secretary General says everybody remains connected. It's not a choice. You stay connected, and we will begin now. We pick up where we left off. We had listened to the presentation of the Institute of the Child, and indeed, we could bring the delegations back if that were considered necessary to participate to the extent necessary. Victor Saudi had told us what the Inter-American Children's Institute has done, and he had presented this to the General Assembly. But if there is no need to bring him back to ask anything, we could simply approve here what he said. Take note, I would suggest, that the Permanent Council is therefore accepting that report and will be presented to the General Assembly at its next meeting. If there is no request for the floor, we are moving forward resolutely, and we consider that item 5, the Children's Institute, is now adopted. We move on to item 6. That's the presentation of the 30th report of the Secretary General to the Permanent Council on the Organization of American States mission to support the peace process in Colombia, known as the MAP OAS. That is item 6. The relevant document is CP Doc 5715/21. That report was distributed to all delegations as Doc 5715/21. I'm going to give the floor to Roberto Menendez, the head of the mission, and I will ask you for an executive summary of the same. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and a very warm greeting to all of you. And I greet also the Secretary General, the Assistant Secretary General, and our esteemed colleagues who have been so supportive within our MAP OAS efforts. I am honored again to speak to you today for the third time, virtually actually, as a result of one of the most critical challenges that I think humanity has ever faced. And let me here express our deepest respect, our solidarity, and our condolences where necessary to those who have been hit by COVID, who have died from it, and the untold numbers at the front line who work so very hard at their own risk to help the health of others. Now, the presence of MAP OAS in the whole region of Colombia allows me to present to you, as the Secretary General has already heard and was just announced, the 30th report of the Secretary General to you on the support to the peace process. This goes from June to July of 2021 in 190 municipalities and 22 departments of the country of Colombia. This report puts forth very significant advances and breakthroughs with regard to building peace, programs of development that focus on the territory, a comprehensive plan to fight against illicit crops, the hypersectoral approach for the stemming of sexual violence against little boys, little girls, and adolescents, to mention but these. Now, the point is also made that there is a 10-year period in which we are attempting to restore the victims to the extent possible for everything they have lost. The High Commissioner for Peace is to be thanked for installing these concepts of peace, reconciliation, and peaceful coexistence as the challenges of peace remain so strong. The Secretary General also values the efforts that have been made by the efforts in Colombia, particularly ensuring a set of activities that are nimble, that are agile, that are comprehensive over 2021, so that the public policy that aims to coexistence and peace rather than stigmatization can indeed be accepted. We would hope that these values be embraced, that they be consolidated by all of the actors under all rubrics in all territories, because all of them go to the importance of state action and the necessary support there to work under irreversibility and humanitarian assistance. There can be no backward march in that regard. The presentation of this report on the Truth Commission will certainly also represent a fundamental element in the ongoing resolution of the long-standing armed conflict in Colombia. We hope that that Truth Commission will strengthen dialogue, strengthen unity, and strengthen the climate of reconciliation and political coexistence. Peace, as we know, is more than empty words or hopeful desiderata. It's facts, it's hard action that makes the difference. And the government of Colombia is, of course, in the driver's seat in that regard. Colombia faces now a new opportunity to bring positions together, to achieve a rapprochement, and to meet the exigencies of the moment. Colombia needs and deserves a complete peace. Now, Mr. Chairman, in the scope of what is being proposed here, and in the last 6 months of this period, the negative aspects of the pandemic were felt more than at the beginning. As occurred in other countries, persistent inequalities were deepened and access to rights were increasingly unequal. The matter is complex, what can I say? But the General Secretary points out how important it is to keep looking at the activity of armed forces that, by their actions and lack of solidarity, continue to pose a challenge. Alerts as to grave situations such as homicides, forced recruitment, the lockdown of communities, gender-based violence, and the anti-personnel mines that are everywhere. So in the Cauca, Caquetá, Cesara, and Meta, and other provinces, we have noted how critical the activities of armed groups has been, threats, violence. In Nariño, there were attacks that were directed principally against the indigenous authorities of the Agua, this in Cauca, Santomaco, and neighboring areas. In the Meta, Caquetá, and Guayrara areas, threats of death threats to a number of leaders, which were a very dampening effect on several activities that had, in fact, begun to take root. There were threats, of course, to the defenders of peace, homicides, forced disappearances, trafficking in persons, girls, boys. We sound the alert here as to how important it is to strengthen the measures we have with regard to gender-based value, preventive and collective measures that we have at our disposal that must be supported and must be voiced and seen to be supported in the public spaces. Distinguished members of the Permanent Council, more than ever, Colombia must stand up for dialogue and understanding. It is essential that the process that will lead to an inclusion of the farm communities, the autochthonous societies, the women's movements, the social movements, people who are still struggling under the weight of crime, of inequality, and violence of all sorts. More needs to be done. And at this time, yes, of daunting challenge elsewhere, we urge you all not to give up, but to keep believing in the peace process in Colombia. MAP-OAS is the absolute proof of the determination of the member states of the OAS to see this through. For that, your political support, your financial support is critical, particularly there where crime, inequity, and violence are rampant. The General Secretariat and the MAP-OAS thanks Colombia for confirming the extension of the mandate through the period 2022 through 2024. During that time, we hope, or rather in the next few days, that extension will be formalized. This represents an enormous responsibility vis-a-vis the state of Colombia, the people of Colombia, and the organization itself. To conclude, the General Secretariat and MAP-OAS recognize and deeply appreciate the assistance of our strategic partners in the Canasta Fund and that pooled effort that allows us to continue to act with transparency and efficiency. That ongoing support will allow us to continue to build peace in the most remote areas of Colombia, throughout the country, with impartiality, with respect, and with solidarity. I thank you very much indeed, Chair. Thank you, Roberto. You are crystal clear, and what you have stated is hugely important. I'm going to ask for anyone wishing to speak to so signify. Ambassador Tony has the floor. The interpreter regrets the sound was bad. I didn't hear who it was. Colombia.
Agradezco al secretario.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the Secretary General for including the 30th report of the MAP-OAS in this session. It covers the period from July 1st to December 31st, 2020. We appreciate the role that the MAP has played in carrying out the mandate that the Permanent Council issued going back to January 2004 to oversee the efforts, commitments, and expressions of will on the part of the Colombian state. And in that regard, we are grateful for the fluid communication that the MAP has maintained with the institutions of the state, both to acknowledge the tasks and also to acknowledge the tasks and efforts that are going well as to make recommendations about what needs to be proposed or corrected or reformulated. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through the Vice Ministry for Multilateral Affairs in particular, has always been very attentive when it comes to maintaining a direct dialogue with the mission. And it is grateful that it's been maintained in all circumstances. In the past, the Peace Cabinet of the government weighed the valuable contribution that has been made by the MAP-OAS for more than 17 years of work with a view to overcoming the armed conflict and building peace. As a result, the government has officially asked the OAS to extend the mandate of the mission for a new 3-year period so as to continue with its wide-ranging and flexible monitoring of the peace process. We place our confidence in our trust in the MAP-OAS, in the full conviction that it has the experience, the necessary knowledge of our country, and the necessary knowledge of its diverse actors in order to be able to provide effective cooperation. In addition, we value the importance of preserving the prudent and impartial role that the mission has played. convinced that with these principles, viable scenarios for continuing to make progress on the objectives will be feasible. In coming days, the Foreign Ministry and the Office of the High Commissioner for Peace will review the legal and regulatory framework conferred by the current mandate of the OAS and its extensions, so as to be in a position to formally translate this decision into a new protocol. Mr. Chairman, this report is presented amidst one of the moments of the greatest difficulties because of the tough impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Notwithstanding, and despite the complexity of the times, there is an appeal that is cross-cutting and that one notes throughout the report. And it is the firm will and action of the government when it comes to implementing its peace-building policy. The report highlights the gains in the policy of peace with legality, which is an important strategy for articulating priority aspects of the agenda, by which the idea is to guarantee more rights for citizens. It also highlights the program Pact for Colombia, Pact for Equality, which is making progress in social and productive inclusion. It recognizes the struggle by the state to go after drug trafficking and the illegal armed groups. Also clear are the mentions made with respect to the keen activity of the institution when it comes to bringing out about a more just and egalitarian society. Colombia also values the recognition of the efforts by the authorities to put in place policies that seek to transform local realities. One example are the development plans with a territorial focus. The report also notes the transformations of the institutional architecture as it recognizes the integral system for truth, justice, reparation, and non-repetition. As I said at the outset, there are challenges and recommendations that mustn't be ignored. First of all, the gains in humanitarian demining activities, which have been hindered by indifferent groups that the state nor the hemisphere should tolerate. It must be noted that as a result of the pandemic, in some territories, these armed groups have taken advantage of the moment to take over control of drug production chain. This is particularly harmful to the integrity of the communities, and in that context, we accept the recommendation to design integral strategies for dismantling criminal structures. That challenge lies with the Commission on Security Guarantees. We mustn't tire of recalling that the action of illegal armed groups is the #1 cause of the violations of rights of Colombians, as is indicated in the report. The ELN, the FARC dissident fronts or groups, the Gulf Clan, and the Caparros all continue to generate terrorist violence. In that regard, the government continues to reinforce strategies for protecting the most vulnerable groups, ensuring them guarantees, seeking strategies for increasing the presence of the army and police in the territory, as well as the mechanisms for filing complaints. We seek to protect demonstrations in which citizens' claims and voices have a space when they express themselves peacefully and in the context of recognition of common rights. Accordingly, we recognize the need to put in place tools that make it possible to strengthen a social dialogue, not through violent actions which seek to take advantage of citizen expression to bring about terror, chaos, and destruction. The challenges are enormous. We have gone only a short way down the road, but the gains have been solid. In this regard, we consider that efforts to achieve peace take time and require that one build on what has been built through long-term views. We also need to bring together many decisions to the government, the communities, and in order to be able to adopt timely and essential steps for a state under the rule of law. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alejandro Ordóñez Maldonado. I see that Canada, Hugh Adsett, is seeking the floor. You have the floor. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll begin in French, and after a couple of moments, I'll continue in English. Canada is grateful for this very well-documented and detailed report, and we'd like to congratulate and thank Roberto Menendez, Chief of the Mission, and his whole team across Colombia for their striking work to support consolidation of peace in Colombia. Also, we are pleased with the progress made by the Colombian government to date. Nonetheless, Canada continues to be seriously concerned about the situation described by the map, the violence which has stepped up in certain territories, threats and murders of human rights defenders, social leaders, and former combatants, all of which has been only been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also concerned about the recruitment of children, forced displacement, the differential impact that the dynamics of violence and conflict, armed violence, continues to have on women and children, the LGBTI population, the indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities as well. Canada supports the complete and constructive recommendations set out by the map and is ready and willing to help through the map and through the anti-mining program or mine removal program, and particularly as a partner of the Colombian government and people.
Canada will support the map, not only because it's a regional effort in support of one of our members, but because in its near 15-year history, it's proven itself to be a trusted interlocutor with all sides of the conflict, while maintaining its autonomy and objectivity on behalf of the members of the Organization of American States. The recommendations in the report that we've heard today will require support if they're to be implemented. Last week, in a meeting with Vice President Ramirez, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Marc Garneau, announced an additional Canadian contribution of $2.5 million to the OAS map in Colombia for the period 2021 to 2023. This funding will support efforts to monitor, report on, and support peace building in Colombia, including via the Truth Commission, to deliver culturally appropriate truth and reconciliation activities to ethnic victims of the conflict, with a particular focus on women and girls. As Canada examines how we can further help, we encourage other members to consider how they can support Colombians build peace through this organization. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. I see that no one else is seeking the floor, and so we're going to do the following. If there are no more requests, the chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the report on the mission in support of the peace process in Colombia, which is contained in document CP set 57-5121, and we thank Roberto Menendez, Chief of Mission, and the entire team of the MAP OAS for the work that they are continuing to carry out in this very important task. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. It is agreed. This takes us to item 7, consideration of the draft resolution of the SIFTA. Next, and mindful of the request put by the Chair of the Committee on Hemispheric Security, I now put to the Permanent Council for your consideration the draft resolution, place and date of the 5th Conference of States Parties of the Inter-American Convention Against the Manufacture or Illicit Manufacturing and Trafficking of Firearms, ammunition, explosives, and other related materials, and the 21st regular meeting of the Consultative Committee or Advisory Committee of SIFTA is a document which is to be found in CP/CSH-2083/21 Rev 1. I see no objections. Therefore, it is approved. Fine. What we're going to do next is a serial action, which is to say, item 8 is approval of minutes from different sessions of the Permanent Council. So I'm going to read out all of the Numbers of the minutes. Act 2160 of the regular session, 14 May 2018. Later then, minutes 2161 of the regular session, 25 May 2018. Minutes 2162 of the regular session, 30 May 2018. Minutes 2163 of the regular session, 31 May 2018. 2166 of the special session, 22 June 2018. 2167 of the joint session of 22 June 2018, minutes 2169 of the joint session of 11 July 2018, and 2180 of the regular session of 5 September 2018. If there are no observations, there is a request for the floor from the Mexican ambassador. Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Ambassador, you have the floor before we approve the minutes, of course. Thank you, Chair. Mexico, as chair of the Conference of States Parties and Secretary Pro Tem of the Consultative Committee of the Inter-American Convention Against Illicit Manufacturing and Trafficking of Firearms, Munitions, and Related Materials, SIFTA, is grateful to the member states of the convention for the adoption of this resolution. In coming days, my delegation will convene 2 preparatory meetings, which should be held during September, to reach agreement on the respective documents, which will be circulated with lead time. We ask that you participate actively in these meetings and that you call on your national authorities to do so as well, so that the meetings to be held October 4th and 5th of this year will be beneficial and of key importance to our countries. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. That was the previous point. No problem. We link that to the previous point, so that these comments by the ambassador are associated with the previous point and not this point on the minutes approval. So subject, I submit to you for your approval the minutes that I've just read through, and so they are approved, as there are no objections. This takes us to the last item on the agenda, other matters. So I offer the floor to those delegations that wish at this time to address informational matters. I offer the floor. I'm looking at the request list. Still don't see anyone asking for the floor. I'm going to let a few more seconds go by to see if any delegation is interested in raising any point at this time. And if not, I see Ambassador Boshid. Go ahead, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the different authorities who have attended the session on equitable distribution of vaccines today. I'd also like to thank and congratulate the government of Colombia for its very noble gesture with respect to the countries of the Caribbean. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having given me the floor. My delegation takes this opportunity to inform the Permanent Council of how this situation has evolved in Haiti since the assassination, the brutal assassination of the democratically elected president of the Republic. His Excellency Jovenel Moïse was subject to an armed attack perpetrated when he was in his private residence last 7 July. Before his assassination, the President of the Republic, after a lengthy process of consultation with various political parties and organized sectors of the country, had designated to become president. Last 5 July, he designated Ariel Henry as prime minister. The mission was to form a national unity government. Due to the assassination of the president, Henri was not installed as prime minister on the date that had been set. As a result, the outgoing government presided over by the current foreign minister, Claude Joseph, had to continue to ensure continuity of the state and to ensure that all measures be taken to help the nation grieve upon the loss of the president and his that there be a national funeral with his family that would be worthy of a head of state. In addition, we have had to look at the national security system with a view to track down and apprehend those guilty, those who carried out and the masterminds behind the assassination of the president. With a view to the funeral for the head of state, it will be taking place on the 23rd of July in the historic site of Cap-Haïtien. And so there will be days of national grieving. Mr. Chairman, my delegation informs the Permanent Council that our government, presided over by the consensus-based Prime Minister, Dr. Ariel Henry, was installed yesterday at the helm of the country. His government's main task is to pursue the consultations so as to hold inclusive, free, democratic, and transparent elections as soon as possible this year, so as to endow the country with a constitutional authority elected, both the executive, the legislature, as well as subnational governments and other positions as provided for in the Constitution. The holding of elections this year was the assassinated president's top priority, with a view to transferring power to a democratically elected president in February of 2022, and to have a functional legislature as of January 2022. The government of the Republic commits itself to working to have the last wishes of the President of the Republic materialized, put in practice. I did want to provide this information to the Permanent Council regarding the inquiry into the assassination of the President of the Republic. The National Police, supported by investigators from the FBI, Interpol, and Colombian police technical personnel, have apprehended 26 persons, mostly foreign nationals, for the involvement in these events. Several masterminds of the crime have been identified and measures have been taken. Several residences have been searched and the materials, including firearms, have been seized. Administratively speaking, the General Inspectorate of the National Police has carried out 45 interviews of police, and 23 have been subject to special measures. These members of the police have been put in isolation. The government and the police authorities continue to be mobilized to pursue the inquiry with a view to identifying the masterminds and those who have financed this horrible crime. And I take this opportunity to thank the member states of the organization that are cooperating with the authorities of my country in the context of said inquiry. Mr. Chairman, I conclude my remarks recalling that the support of the Organization of American States has been constant. Its support for the Haitian people over these last years. Today, still, we count on the support of the organization to accompany the Haitian nation until and through the conclusion of the electoral process. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Now, the Secretary will correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see any other requests for the floor, which I think would take us to the final phase. Yeah, can you confirm that? Yes, I see that there are none there, so I'd like to thank the Secretariat. No one else is seeking the floor, so I thank everyone for their participation, and the session is adjourned.